Good morning.
Good morning.
Second Corinthians chapter 8. Lesson 8 in our study of 2 Corinthians. The first 15 verses of chapter 8, I should say, which deals with giving. Giving is sort of the topic under discussion and consideration at the beginning of 2 Corinthians 8, which may require a little bit of background as far as what exactly is going on here, because he doesn't necessarily mention it outright. But from the earliest days of the church, the Christians in Jerusalem were somewhat poverty-stricken as a rule. It's been noted that in no other city in the Greek world did Christians sell their goods in order to feed the poor, in order to help others that were in poverty. Also, Jerusalem was located in at the peak of a chain of mountains. The exports were very few, relatively few, I should say. Taxes were terrible, and farmland was scarce, and there were many among them that they knew no other way of life. And even in Nehemiah's day, there were people in Judea that were having a hard time living in Jerusalem for that reason. Well, when Paul wrote 2 Corinthians, he had been working on this mission for multiple years, and that was to gather a collection to help to alleviate the situation of the poor Christians in Jerusalem. He wanted to gather, collect this sum from different churches, congregations, and to take it to Jerusalem, the Jerusalem church, to help the Christians there. It's unclear exactly when he started this. We see references to it in various places in the New Testament, but as far as when it began is unclear. It may have been near the end of at the end of his second missionary journey when he went to Jerusalem. And Luke doesn't really say too much about that part of that mission. So it may be that Paul met with the church there and stayed there for not a very long time, but maybe long enough to maybe see the poverty, see the situation at that time. And so we see in 1 Corinthians 16, he tells the Corinthians how he admonished the Galatian brethren to give. He tells them in Corinth to do the same. And then in Romans, he brings it up at the end of Romans. And then he brings it up here in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. So it was something that was on Paul's mind, and he was anxious about it. He wanted to get this done. But it wasn't just for providing food for the poor. There was another side to this giving that we should emphasize, and that was unity. The unity of Christians. Christians are in need in one place. Christians in another place ought to help them. That is how it should be automatically. So the collection here, especially when we consider the Jew and Gentile element, was a powerful statement to the Jewish Christians that the Gentile churches cared about them and supported them and were there for them, literally, to help their need. And so Christian unity and peace among each other is another side to this collection that he was giving. If you remember, he actually expressed his anxiety about whether they would receive it or not because of the source of where it was coming from. And thankfully, we read when he did get there, they did receive it gladly. So the pattern of giving then is long established in the Bible, all the way in the Old Covenant, the Old Testament. People who lived under the law of Moses were required to give a tenth. Another word for that is a tithe. If you've ever heard of tithing, that is where that idea comes from. That's where that word, anyway, comes from. So they were to give a tenth of their harvest, Leviticus 27, verse 30. It provided for the religious leaders who were the Levites who were there at the temple, and they were supposed to be supported in that way. But also it helped people in need, Deuteronomy 14:29. Well, even though we don't live under the Old Covenant anymore, which we've already seen in this letter, there is still the need to give of our means, the responsibility. We need to give so the gospel can be preached. It would be great if things didn't take money, because money is usually one of the, if not the biggest, one of the, probably top tier list of obstacles in doing something. I want to go do this, don't have the money. Well, preaching the gospel in different places is no exception, especially when you're talking about going around the world or going somewhere else. So one reason that giving is necessary is for the gospel. And I would probably say that would be, if there is a number one reason, that would be it. The spreading and proclamation of the truth of the gospel should be number one priority in every case, in every facet of Christian life, and giving is one of those. Producing materials is part of that evangelistic effort. It takes money to print those things. It takes even more money if you want it to look good, and not just in a vain way, but there is something there to it actually appearing aesthetically pleasing. Takes even more money. Supporting men who preach the gospel. So it's, in the local sense, I guess, is another thing. So Paul made it pretty clear that those who benefit from the gospel message are expected to support those who proclaim that truth to them. But also helping the needy. Helping the needy is another thing. Those who are in need, Galatians 6:10, Dean just referenced it in his prayer. Doing good to all men, but especially those of the household of faith. Well, what's the first part of that? Doing good to all men, all people. And part of that, doing good is not always about money, but money is one of the tools that a person can utilize to fulfill that verse, doing good to all men. Christians first, of course. That's what he means by especially. But all. So it's not just about the gospel, but also about helping people who are in need. Now, part of being able to help people who are in need is knowing who's in need. Because if you don't know who's in need, then how can you help those in need? Because you don't even know who they are. I'd like to give. I'd like to help people in need, but I don't know any. I don't know anybody. I don't know any poor people or homeless people or what have you. So awareness is going to play a part in this text as well, as we're going to see. The biggest difference between Old Testament giving and New Testament giving, and I mean, biggest could probably have an asterisk next to it because it may not be the real biggest, but one of the main differences is the New Testament specifies no amount. There's no amount, numerical figure, percentage, not even a word that implies a fraction, tenth, or anything like that. Which really does not mean that it doesn't matter, per se, but it just means that we should give freely and willingly. And that forces us to examine ourselves, as we should all the time, but whenever it's left up to us and sort of personalized based on what we have, which we're also going to see in this text, we should examine ourselves, because at the end of the day, only two people know what I have. Me and God. That's it. Hopefully our spouse would know as well. But if it all came down to it, at least those two always know. So if God knows what I have and what I'm able to do, then I need to make sure I'm fully aware of what I actually have instead of making excuses. But we'll see that in just a second. A tenth, although we don't do it in that way, it certainly could be considered a good starting point but it's going to fluctuate, obviously. We'll see that as well. But those who love God and whose love for God continues to grow aren't going to have to be told to give. They're not going to be able to keep from it. They're not going to be able to hold back because they're going to want to. We'll see that as well in 2 Corinthians 8. And so giving is a way that the faithful can show how much they care about and appreciate and love God. It's also worship, an element of worship. It can be and should be, especially on the first day of the week. But there's giving as we lay by and store, but then there's giving in any other situation of life, any other day that we help somebody who is in need, whether it's a brother or an outsider, for that matter. Early Christians, as we see in Acts and as we see here, they gave in a very sacrificial way. Their giving was sacrificial, self-sacrificial. They actually made sacrifices to be able to give. It was actually a sacrifice. They had to take a hit, if you will, to be able to do it, or to do it. In order to give what they gave, they had to take a financial hit. And that is certainly a powerful example for us that we should use to our benefit and growth. So, the Corinthians. I've already been told about giving in the first letter. Now it's going to be brought up again. 2 Corinthians, anybody have anything? We on the right track so far while I mess with this? I know it's working. Don't tell me it's working. I know it's working, but it's also not working. So I can tell. I can sense. My spidey sense tells me it's not working right. But well enough. Okay. I'm glad everybody agrees with every single word I just said. So 2 Corinthians 8, beginning in verse 1. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means, and of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then, by the will of God, to us. So naturally, based on everything we've already said, Paul understood the responsibility that Christians have toward those in need, especially those among them, Christians, fellow Christians. Acts 11:29 says, the disciples determined, everyone according to his ability, to send relief to the brothers living in Judea. Galatians 6:10, we already alluded to. Do good to all men, and especially those of the household of the faith. In the next chapter in 2 Corinthians, he goes on again about this supplying the needs of the saints. And as he journeyed westward from Antioch toward Ephesus, he was enlisting, first of all, the Galatian churches in this effort, Then the Macedonian churches, insert map here. And then he hoped that the Christians in Corinth and I guess Achaia around would join the effort. And that's what he's telling them about. Corinth was in Greece, south of Macedonia. Macedonia would have included congregations like Philippi and Thessalonica. And there was also Berea. Even though we don't read of a congregation being established there, we do read about those noble Jews who examined the Scriptures very eagerly to make sure that what the apostles, what they were teaching was the truth. So surely some of those people were converted whenever they established that it was the truth. So now he's using them as an example to the Corinthians, the Christians in Macedonia. And there's a reason he's bringing them up specifically. Dean, did you have something? Okay. The reason is because not just a few things. First of all, they gave a wealth, I guess to use his words, overflowed in a wealth of generosity. So they gave extremely generously. But it's more than that. It's even better than that. It's even deeper than that. It's not just that they gave a lot. Would you say $1 million check would be a lot? Okay, but what if Elon Musk wrote it? Not that much anymore, is it? I mean, it would be to us, but in perspective, that would be like us writing a $100 check, probably, or me anyway. I don't want to speak for you. So part of this was not just the abundance that they gave, but their financial situation in comparative to what they gave. So what he says, listen to some of these words or look at some of these words. He says, the churches of Macedonia, for in a severe test of affliction, which he doesn't specify or elaborate on, he says their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty. Severe test of affliction. Now, if some sort of contribution is coming up, there are probably some things that we would consider legitimate excuses to maybe give less than what we might have wanted to, or to just not give at all. A severe test of affliction might be one of them, right? I didn't see this coming. This was unexpected. This severe test of affliction didn't stop them. Or else, surely, extreme poverty. Not just poverty, extreme poverty. And yet, thrown in there in this sort of sandwich is abundance of joy and wealth of generosity. Severe affliction, extreme poverty, abundant joy, and wealth of generosity.
It makes me think of the people that Paul, works with, that he was talking about, because he works with people that are severely afflicted, sick, from their,
yeah.
That they're very overall joyful.
Yes, we could learn a lot from people who are actually struggling in that way, because we don't know what poverty is. At the end of the day, we don't really know. We don't know what true poverty is, and I have a feeling the Christians in Macedonia did know, and that's why Paul used the word extreme poverty. And yet, they were abundant with joy and were overflowing in a wealth of generosity. Yes, go ahead.
We never know when we might have to be on that receiving end of help, because a lot of people in the Carolinas a few months ago, they were getting by. I guess they had food, clothing, and shelter, so they were living. But then now, food, shelter, and clothing, they have to get it from somebody else. So they go from the haves to being the have-nots.
Yep.
And so we don't know whether we might be in a situation like that ourselves.
Paul's going to bring that up. By the way, Donovan warned me last time to make sure my batteries work. I failed him and you. Please forgive. Never. Oh, that's next week's sermon right there.
Yes. Let's see.
It can be. You want it to be. Well, my batteries work now, but other things don't. Wish I could show you all what this thing does, but it'll be too loud. If I yell at it really loud, it'll all of a sudden snap out of it. See? Anyway, shall we start over? Or yeah, Paul's going to bring up that there may come a time, like David just said, you're going to be in need. And let me just clarify, that is not to say that should be the motive for giving. Like, hey, if you want them to give when you're in need, then you better give when they're in need. That's not what he means. But
that is kind of the golden rule in a way, to treat others like you want them to treat you. Not
yeah.
that should be the only motive, but it's better than not doing it at all.
Yeah, I guess it's just a further means of encouragement to maybe make them think of a role reversal situation, kind of like the golden rule. You know, what would you want them to do? But he's also, like we already pointed out, he's promoting Christian unity. So it's like, hey, this is the way it's supposed to work. You're in need, they're here to help. They're in need, you're here to help. And everybody wins like that. Everybody wins when we do that. Not just on a congregational level, but on an individual level too. I'm here for you, you're here for me. I lift you up, you lift me up. That way I don't have to worry about lifting myself up, and you don't have to worry about lifting yourself up, because we're all lifting each other up, and everybody wins. So in this case, he's using the Macedonians as an example because of their affliction, whatever that was, and their extreme poverty. And even though they were in extreme poverty, they gave beyond their means. There was a certain woman during Jesus' ministry that certainly fits this kind of description. That widow that Jesus saw going to the temple and giving her gift. We don't even know what they were doing exactly. In detail. They were there. You know, his disciples may have been talking to him or asking questions in general, but his attention was drawn to that woman. And he knew, probably because of who he was, he knew what she gave, and he knew that was all that she had. And he sort of turned it into a parable and asked them, who gave more? Kind of like the Elon Musk example I just used. The one who gave $1 million, or the one who gave $1? And naturally they said, easy, duh, $1 million. He said, nope, because she gave everything she had. That's all she had. She gave it all. And therefore, she gave more. Because of relative to what she had, she actually gave more as far as individual sincerity and motive is concerned. Yeah, Dean?
Too, that reminds me of the story about the young rich ruler that came to Jesus.
Yep, he walked away sorrowful, for he had many things, or great possessions. And that was a powerful lesson too, of the temptation of greed when you have more, when the mentality should be like David's mentality was in 1 Chronicles 29 when he prayed about the collection for the building of the temple, and he praised God for giving them so much because it meant they could give him so much right back. That should be the way we view the abundance that we might have. But the Macedonian Christians did not have abundance of money or comfort, but they did have an abundance of joy. But there's still another step to this. So it's not just how much they gave, but how much they gave in the circumstances they were in. And then, on top of that, was how eager they were. Eager. How zealous and diligent and desirous they were to take part in this. Because, as he goes on in verse 4, begging us earnestly for the favor or grace of taking part in the relief of the saints. So they had to, maybe they didn't have to. I've sort of characterized it generally of, Paul, the way he words this is almost like they tried to tell them that this is too much in a way, because he kind of says that. They gave beyond their means, but they begged them to take it. No, we will not have it any other way. You're taking this from us. And so that's just another element added on to this, that how much they gave, what their circumstances were financially, and maybe in other areas, and then how they gave according or of their own accord, and begging Paul to be allowed to take part in giving, not receiving. They begged Paul for the honor to take part in giving away their money. Just a profound idea. Anybody?
Here says they gave themselves. Now, what does that? How do they include? If you give yourselves first, what does that involve?
Yeah.
It could be maybe some of them might have went over, came over here to help them out, these other people. What they gave themselves, so we don't know exactly. Then, go into details of actually what that all involved.
Yeah, I think verse 5 is a powerful, whatever you want to call it, explanation almost, it seems. How is it that these Christians were the way they were in the way that Paul has described, so that they did what they did? Well, it seems to me that there's at least a hint of the explanation in verse 5. And word order probably varies across translations. The ESV is not my favorite in the word order, but he says, first, they gave themselves to the Lord. Then, they gave themselves to us. It doesn't say they gave themselves again, but that's implied whenever it... First, they gave themselves to the Lord. Then, to us. And therefore, they were willing and eager to give whatever they had for the Christian, to the Lord ultimately.
I think it's a unique mindset as Christians that we have is totally different from the world. The world looks at it like, tell someone what they need to give or how much you've got. Nowhere in the New Testament does it ever tell someone how much they have to give. It's this mindset of you realize what Christ has done for you and what other people have done for you. You get the grace and the willingness to give and help others. It's just like we don't like to be told how remember as a little kid, my dad and the neighbor would come over. He was a farmer, and he'd come over, and he'd always had a brand new Oldsmobile 98. And he sat there talking to my dad. I remember he would go with a denomination in town, and they always told him how much he had to tithe. And they'd tell him next year he had to give more than he did before. He was always upset about how much they told him he had to tithe, even though he was sitting there in his new Oldsmobile 98. But, that's just not the mindset we are to have as Christians. That's just, it's worthless when we give because somebody's told us what we have to do. It's supposed to give from the heart because we want to.
Yeah, it takes a lot away from it whenever you've been told in some authoritative manner, exactly what you have to give by some body of people that don't even have the authority to do that, by the way. But the idea of money in general is kind of one of those taboo things in our society. You don't talk about it. Even in a job interview, maybe. You don't say it. Got to write it down. Write down the number. You don't even say the number. If somebody asks you how much you make, it's like, that's rude. What a strange and inappropriate thing to ask. Or how much money you have. I wonder why that is. And this is, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but maybe it's because of how much value we put on money and what it says about us as people. That's why we're so hush-hush about it, because it's almost built in to our culture at this point that how much money you have is what determines your own value as a human being, whereas we should view it, it's just money. It's just money. Unrighteous mammon, as Jesus called it. It's just money. And we should view it as a tool not only to live and survive, but to help people, to help other people who don't have as much money, who don't have as much, not just who don't have any. Like every person has to produce their bank statement for you to prove that you have $0 and 0 cents in the bank, or else you don't qualify for my benevolence. But those who are in need, who have less than I do, I should at least consider. And not even those who have less, but just random acts of kindness, as they're called. And some money is a blessing that facilitates more of that, but only if our hearts do as well. Only if we look at it that way. Like Ron said, it's a different way of thinking. That's why I love 1 Chronicles 29 so much when David prayed that, because there's some powerful stuff there about the mentality of abundant blessings, physical, material blessings. So, verse 6, he goes on and says, "Accordingly, we urged Titus that as he had started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. But as you excel in everything, in faith and speech and knowledge and all earnestness, and in our love for you," or your love for us, seems more likely and is an alternate translation, "see that you excel in this act of grace also. I say this not as a command, but to prove by the earnestness of others that your love also is genuine. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you by his poverty might become rich. And in this matter I give my judgment. This benefits you, who a year ago started not only to do this work, but also to desire to do it. So now finish doing it as well, so that your readiness in desiring it may be matched by your completing it out of what you have." So, not a command, he says, but it is a chance for them to prove that their love is genuine, that they're for real. Back it up with actions. And then he brings an even better example of giving, and that's Jesus. He was rich. Was he? Where's the verse that says Jesus was rich? Yes, he was rich, not in earthly terms, but he's God in the flesh. He was God. And can you go, is there any more of a drastic drop than going from God to being man in the flesh? So, and as a man, he was poor by earthly standards.
If I may be fanciful, and if I overstep, you of course will set me right. But in a sense, to be a dog is, in that sense, is above being a man, because a dog does not sin, but a man does. So to take the form of a man is to take the form of a slave. Even though he did not know sin,
Yeah.
he made himself like us sinners.
Yeah, as low, down the pole as you can get, and from being God. So in that sense, he was rich. But he became poor by becoming a man, but also as a man, he was poor, like we said. But he did it so that by that poverty, they could become rich. How does that work? Well, we know how it works because we know from our vantage point the plan of God and the plan of man's redemption. But he's using Jesus as the ultimate example of even embracing your own poverty. Not just embracing the idea of being less well off in order to help somebody be better off. Somebody else be better off. Just look at Jesus, Paul says. But he also reminds them this is good not only for the person who's going to receive the gift, it's also good for the person who gives the gift. It benefits both sides. And we'll run out of time, but can't emphasize enough the distinction that he makes. You not only started to do this work, but also to desire to do it. Like we already mentioned, two different things. Don't you think a lot of people give without the desire to give? Maybe more often than not. There are all kinds of motivating factors, aren't there? Or there can be, that might lead to a person giving, even though they don't want to. Guilt, pressure, avoiding awkwardness. In all three of those instances, and I'm sure there are plenty more, the desire is not even there. It's not a goodness of the heart. It's selfish giving. You're giving because you don't want to feel bad, or you don't want to look bad, or you don't want to experience an awkward exchange or something. That's all self-obsessive, self-obsessed, self-centered. But it's not just about doing it, it's about desiring. And they did not only do it, but they desired to do it. So he says in verse 12, if the readiness is there, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. For I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their abundance may supply your need, that there may be fairness. As it is written, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. So, in addition to other things that we've taken from this text, God expects us to give according to what we have. He does not expect man, his people, to do more, to give more or do more than they're able to do. It's according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. Yeah, Wayne?
I prefer what the book has for verse 12 when it says, "For if there is first a willing mind, it is accepted according to what one has." And I say that 14 years I spent working for short loan companies. And part of my job was to run a budget with everybody before I would make a loan. That budget was detailed down to cigarettes, alcohol, church, and everything else. 99% of the people did not have church in their budget. So the mind wasn't there. Now, they may have given something, but it wasn't predetermined that they were going to do this. And
Yeah.
too many people live that way.
That says a lot. Yep. So what can we take from that? This, according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have, is it's not about comparing each other. I don't give as much as so-and-so, or I give more than so-and-so. Irrelevant. That's as foolish as spiritually comparing yourselves. And Paul said it's stupid to do that. It's foolish to compare yourself with your fellow Christians. It can't really... Usually, it's not going to lead to anything productive. I guess in a sense it could be if you're doing it from a humble... if it's a motivator or something, like being encouraged by somebody else doing something, like that makes me see that I need to do something. But comparing how much one person gives compared to another is irrelevant and silly. Compare it to what you have. Is what I give as much as I can give? Or am I leaving a lot on the table for whatever reason? And are those reasons justifiable? Yeah, Dean?
Well, to me, it just goes to show that whether regardless how rich you are or how poor you are, really, the rich man, or no matter what money he has, it really isn't his. Because you know that in the end, he's not going to take it with him.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that regardless of where you work and everything, what you do have, it doesn't mean, when we lived on this earth, even though we might have a house, maybe a mansion, it's not ours, because we know that we're just here for a short time, and after that time's up, we don't own it anymore. It's not
Yeah.
like somebody else is going to own it.
Yep. So that's why they should be viewed as tools. Everything that we have, tools that we're able to serve God, give us the ability to serve God and help. And part of that is helping other people. All right, we can be encouraged by the faithfulness of fellow Christians. That's why Paul brought them up to the Corinthians. Shows us that the actions of others matter, but what that in turn should remind us also is that our actions matter. So if the actions of others matter, that means my actions matter. We can also be discouraged by the actions of other people. And so we need to keep that in mind when we are in connection with our own actions, because it does make a difference. We can be encouraged or discouraged. And if we ever begin to wonder about our motivation for giving, just look at Jesus. Left heaven to come to earth and die in your place for you. 2 Corinthians 9:15, Paul, in the very next chapter, he said, I have made no use of the rights to receive money from you, nor am I writing these things to secure any such provision. I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of my ground for boasting. Paul wasn't doing it for his own gain, and we shouldn't do anything for our own gain, and giving is one of those things. Yeah, David?
No. It's easy for us to start a project, projects, not finish any of them, but come into this year, which is not very far away, everybody's always asking, what's your New Year's resolution going to be? How to do this and that? get about 3 or 4 months into the year, and it fell through.
Yeah. Hey, 3 or 4 months in is pretty good for some people. Sometimes barely make it 3 or 4 weeks. But it should be an ongoing resolution in our minds and hearts to grow in every capacity, spiritually especially.